Hello and welcome. This is Wilrens for Create the Learning Site, the place to go deeper in your understanding of the Bible. In the previous issue, I began an exploration of original sin. According to Genesis 3, something happened. Paul, in Romans 5, sees in this something the reason that all humans are under the condemnation of death. I remained unconvinced of the concept of original guilt or imputed guilt, but acknowledged original condemnation, and I finished part 1 without any explanation for the universal human tendency to sin, even though it is an empirical fact. Objective observation of human behavior bears it out. So how do we account for this? Opinions differ and answers have changed over the centuries. In this podcast, I will look at proposed explanations for this inevitable bend towards sin. First, there is the biological model. The Church Father Augustine believed that original sin is passed on, transmitted from generation to generation, together with or as part of human nature. In modern language, he considered it a near biological process, similar to genetic inheritance. That's why we speak of Erbsünde in German. This makes it difficult to speak of our responsibility for it. Besides, sin or sinful inclination can hardly be biological. It's not in our DNA. There is no gene for sin. It turns out that this is actually not an explanation. Option 2. What if original sin is not the presence of something, but its absence, a lack? In medieval and Catholic theology, this lack is understood to be original justice, which Adam lost in the fall. Original justice was a divine gift that would have enabled humans to live in accordance with God's will. However, this looks a bit thin. Why would humans without this gift, in their natural created state, be fundamentally bent towards sin? 3. The relational factor. In this view, the absence is that of a relationship with God. Well, this relationship was certainly lost after Eden. Humans born into a godless vacuum would naturally bend inward instead of upward and end up living, in the most literal sense of the word, a godless life. It leaves us with little or no chance to live a righteous and godly life. We cannot love the God we do not know, much less love him with all our heart, mind and soul as we should. Now, to add to this, people have equated original sin with several root sins that supposedly make up its essence. For instance, unbelief, pride, inauthenticity, egotism, and a lack of love. It appears to me, however, that original sin precedes all of these. They are its consequences, not original sin itself. Except, perhaps, the absence or misdirection of love. This certainly comes close. 4. The realist understanding. We were all quite literally in Adam because we are his descendants and therefore were in his loins, so to say. Now, admittedly, Hebrews 7 does play with such an idea. Quote, one might even say that Levi himself, who receives tithes, paid tithes through Abraham, or he was still in the loins of his ancestor when Melchizedek met him. However, the opening phrase in Hebrews, one might even say, indicates the author knows he is pushing it here and is actually using a rhetorical ploy. What if we would apply this idea to everyone who became father or mother? Do all their descendants share in what their parents did before birth or conception? I don't see how it can be persuasively argued that we were really present in Adam I'm not sure it explains much even if we were. 5. The federalist model. The word federal derives from the Latin foedus, which means covenant or alliance. In this model, Adam was, by divine covenant, our legal head or representative, much like a monarch or president represents a nation. Theologians therefore speak of federal headship. As the representative of humanity, Adam made the choice for us. We are condemned to death because of his transgression. Now, it is true that decisions made by, for instance, heads of state or other legal representatives have consequences for those they represent. However, we would not normally consider those being represented individually guilty. No German born after the Second World War is guilty of German crimes perpetrated during that war. Germans speak of historical responsibility, yes, but not of guilt. The imputation of Adam's guilt to all his descendants answers the question, if it does even that, at the expense of justice. Besides, nowhere in Scripture is Adam declared to be our head, the way Christ is, so how did he come to be our legal representative? Federal headship assumes what it has to prove. In addition, it offers no explanation for the universal tendency to sin that plagues humanity. It's about guilt and condemnation. But how are we to explain universal sinfulness? 6. Sin as a force. Humanity's declaration of independence in Genesis 3 placed us outside of God's protection. We fell prey to the power of sin, an external force that Paul refers to in Romans 6 and 7. In other words, we're up against evil and its agents. I'm not sure this offers a complete answer, but it is at least a partial one. Sin reigns. 7. There are psychological and existential models. Many modern readers take Genesis 2 and 3 as a timeless statement about human nature or human existence. To them, the story is not about an event or a process in history. It expresses something that is generally true for humanity. The narrative is about all of us. The problem with such approaches is that they make original sin a part of who we are, something that is essential to our humanity. A flaw in creation, it seems, which makes God responsible, or at the very least exonerates us. 8, and last, there is the sociological explanation. Every human is born into a human race already separated from God and in many ways under the sway of sin. If we understand human personhood as something that develops and unfolds gradually, it's easier to see that it must be shaped by its surroundings. From the beginning, growing up, there's no love of God. What else will this new person love and worship idolatrously, but herself or others? There is scriptural support for such a view. From the book of Isaiah, "And I said, Woe is me, for I am lost, for I am a man of unclean lips, and I dwell in the midst of a people of unclean lips. For my eyes have seen the King, the Lord of hosts." And from the Psalms, "The Lord looks down from heaven on the children of man to see if there are any who understand, who seek after God. They have all turned aside. Together they have become corrupt. There is no one who does good, not even one." Psalm 51 verse 5, "In sin did my mother conceive me," may fit in here as well. It is often understood as a reference to original sin, and probably rightly so. But the sin is not David's, and it may not be his mother's either, at least not hers only or specifically. It is an existing reality into which David was born, and it may well be that of the entire human race. Presumably, then, there is a solidarity in sin that collectively turns us away from God. You may have noticed that I did not argue for one definite answer on purpose. The explanations for original sin have changed over the centuries. The empirical fact remains. But let me try to summarize. The universality of original sin, it seems to me, includes a social component. We are born into autonomous and rebellious humanity. It also includes a relational component. We are born already separated from God in relationship with sinful human beings, but not with Him. As a result, we do not love or worship God. In fact, we don't know Him. Instead, we adopt as our own the human autonomy chosen by the human and his wife when they ate the forbidden fruit. As a result, we each become our own woefully inadequate center of the world as we bend inward. We willingly follow our disordered desires into actual sin. And then there is a spiritual component as well. The world is under the power of sin as a force. But does that adequately explain original sin and sinfulness? I'm not at all sure that it does. It may be at the deepest level, sin defies explanation. Like evil, it literally makes no sense. In closing, I would like to say a few things about the importance and usefulness of the concept of original sin for today. I owe much of this to Richard Coleman, even though I do not share the way he reads Genesis or his understanding of original sin. I do like some of the implications he points out for today. Coleman speaks of theology armed with the enduring truth of original sin. Well, that's quite a radical idea. How will that help us? 2 points. First, original goodness. Coleman balances original sin with the concept of original goodness. We usually think of it under the term the image of God, but however we put it, let's not lose sight of this other side of human existence. We can make too much of it, but it would also be an error to leave it out altogether. We are, in every aspect of our being, corrupted, but we are not entirely and purely evil. Unlike Satan, whose fall was total and complete, ours is not. Rather, we are this weird and inconsistent mixture of the best, or at least the good, and the worst. There is our worst self and our best self, and much in between. Humanity is noble, with the original dignity not entirely lost, although it is broken. And that brokenness from birth is original sin. And then point 2 is this should lead us to healthy caution, because one hugely significant practical consequence of original sin is we are not as good as our ideals. This is one reason I believe why communism failed so spectacularly. Too often its leaders exempted themselves from hardship and lived a life of privilege. As George Orwell satirized in Animal Farm, all animals are equal, but some animals are more equal than others. We fall short of our best intentions and ideals. Knowing this, our humanity seems prone to forget, should lead to caution. It's especially important when a brave new world with exciting breakthroughs is upon us, such as the promise of artificial intelligence, genetic engineering, and the possibility of age reversal leading to much longer lifespans. Well, not to spoil the party, but let's be careful and keep our eyes open. And with us, I don't mean Christians only. Everyone, regardless of what name they prefer, if original sin is not to their liking, should be aware of this perennial pitfall. We are not as good as our best ideas. Perhaps Gilbert Chesterton put it best, quote, "But Christianity preaches an obviously unattractive idea, such as original sin. But when we wait for its results, they are pathos and brotherhood, and the thunder of laughter and pity, for only with original sin we can at once pity the beggar and distrust the king. Original goodness and healthy skepsis, which is why we pity the beggar and distrust the king.
The show will be starting in just a few moments. Thank you for your patience. The show will be starting in just a few moments. Thank you for your patience.